All right, Tabosai, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's share. To thank our annual Talmud Torah sponsor, the Tolsim Shmach of Eretz Yisrael, for dedicating all the Shumer Drushos this year as a Zechus for Besoros Tovos for all of Am Yisrael. Our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Tammuz, Habalin, Latova, Aaron, and Alana Weinberg. And thanks to Hashem for all of his nisim, both the revealed and the hidden, for the miracle of Yonatan Shai Weinberg 14 years ago, for Besoros Tovos for Am Yisrael, for Eretz Yisrael, and the merit of the speedy arrival of Mashiach. Daniel and Batsheva Pava, in commemoration of the second yahrzeit of Batsheva's father, of Shlomo ben Yehuda Aryeh Vei, a child survivor of Auschwitz, who was zocheh to leave over 100 descendants in this world. And our shir Daf Yomi this morning is sponsored by David and Rivki Flum in the schus of a refuah shlema for David's father, Yitzchak Aryeh ben Rus Rice. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, he will have a refuah together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. Hope in the merit of our Talmud Torah, Mirat Hashem, and bring home all of our hostages, should allow all of our holy soldiers to be successful, and Mirat Hashem should shower Klal Yisrael with bracha, with Besoros Tovos. Well, so with that, let us begin. We have a really incredible daf ahead of us today. Today's daf is Chav Ches 28, and we are picking up Emiras Hashem on Chav Zayin Beis. We have a lot to do today. So we're picking up on 20. We're good. Short daf, very short daf today. We are picking up on 27 B Chav Zayin Amud Beis. Look at the bright side. It could have been Chav Zayin Amud Aleph, right? So there's always so Chav Zayin is at the Meisvei, which is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 lines down from the top. So also remember again, we've been dealing with a case, or with a statement, I should say, of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan essentially said, Safek chai, safek meis ein misrapin mehen, that if a Jew is afflicted with an ailment and there is a possibility of fatality, he should not seek out medical treatment from an akum. However, vaday meis, if he has a terminal condition, then he is allowed to seek out medical treatment from an akum. The Gemara said, what about chayisha? What about the idea that even though he's going to die, right, he's going to die as a result, ultimately, again, of his ailment? What about the fact that potentially seeking out medical intervention from the akum could expedite or could hasten his death? The Gemara said, chayisha lo chayshina. We're not worried about that. In other words, that doesn't factor into the equation. The Gemara is going to question that. Meisvei, Lo yisav yitain adam minin. A person should not engage in commerce with minin. So as I remember again, a min. We've used that term a lot of different ways. In yesterday's daf, min meant like a priest to avoda Zara. But min often means someone who is aduk, someone who is really embedded in the worship of idolatry. I guess opposed to like a recreational idolater, right? Or an episodic idolater. A min is someone really who's all in, who's right, all fully committed. So you can't do business with him. And you can't go ahead and seek out medicinal intervention from them, even if it's just a question of chayisha, which makes it sound like even if a person is suffering from a terminal illness, you still can't seek out medical intervention from an akum. That obviously contradicts what we just said before. Mara tells a story to support this. Ben Dama ben Achosos Rabbi Shmuel Shehikish Nachash. So listen to this. There was a story with Ben Dama. Now Ben Dama was the nephew of Rabbi Shmuel. And what happened? Ben Dama was bitten by a snake. Ubo Yaakov ish kfar sechayim l'raposo. Now this guy Yaakov ish kfar sechayim. So it's funny. Like you hear it, like a good Jewish doctor, right? Comes along. Only problem was he was a min. So he came to treat him ultimately again for the snake bite. Rabbi Shmuel would not let again this guy, Yaakov ish kfar sechanya, Yaakov from the village of Schanya, to treat Ben Dama. Wouldn't allow him to treat Ben Dama. Now Ben Dama, listen to this. So Ben Dama, who again is the son of the sister Rabbi Shmuel, who is the nephew of Rabbi Shmuel. So Ben Dama says to his uncle, Rabbi Shmuel Achi, Rabbi is literally my brother. In other words, my uncle, Hanach lo ve'erpaimenu, let him heal me. So this is the nephew asking his uncle to please allow the min to treat his snake bite. And I'll bring a raya, I'm going to bring a proof that it's mutter, that it should be permitted for him to treat me. What happened? And Ben Dama didn't even have a chance to finish his words until he died as a result of the snake bite. Incredible story. Karla Rabbi Shmuel said about his nephew, Ashrecha Ben Dama, praiseworthy are you Ben Dama, Shegufach Tahar, your body is holy. V'yatzasa nishmascha b'tara, and your soul left your body in a state of tara. V'lo avarta al divrei chaveirecha, and you did not violate the words of your fellow rabbinic colleagues. Shayu omrim uporetz geder yishachenu nachash. As the pasuk says, he who breaches the fence will be bitten ultimately by a snake. Now, also in this pasuk in Koheles, the Gemara often understands to mean the geder is often a reference to the wall of rabbinic law. And again, Chazal used the pasuk to teach us how careful and vigilant we have to be with the preservation and the adherence to rabbinic law. So Rabbi Shmuel extols his nephew that here you did not violate rabbinic law, you died in a state of tara. Now, interestingly enough, so again, what rabbinic law didn't he violate? So Rabbi Shmuel is saying you didn't seek out medicinal healing from a min, from an akum. Now this contradicts what we just said before, because before we said that in a case of terminal illness you can seek out treatment from an akum. Here we're saying, Rabbi Shmuel is saying you can't seek out treatment from an akum. So what's going on over here? To which the Gemara says no. Shiny minos the mishka the mashcha the asil mishmach basrayu. It's different. It's very interesting. There's a difference between a min and an akum. A min and an akum. An akum obviously is someone in general who we'd rather not deal with. But lamaisa, if it's a terminal illness and it's just a case of chayisha, we'll deal with him. A min is much more dangerous because a min, because of his incredible allegiance to his Avoda Zara, has a way of bringing other people into his Avoda Zara. So therefore, again, Chazal did not want any interactions with the min at all. So even in a case of terminal illness, Rabbi Shmuel felt one should not seek out medical intervention from the min. Amar lavarta divrei chavrecha she'omrim paris kedi yeshachenu nachash. Shmuel says it's very interesting. So it's interesting. Rabbi Shmuel said, Ben Dama, you're so praiseworthy. You did not violate the words of your rabbinic colleagues, because after all, everyone knows that if you violate the words of Chazal, what's going to happen? You're going to get bitten by a snake. Well, didn't seem to help Ben Dama all too much in this situation. The Gemara says, Ihu nami havitarke. He was still havitarke chivya. No, havitarke. Ihu nami chavya tarke. But Ben Dama was also bitten by a snake. So what exactly did he gain over here? So it's very profound Gemara. Chavye drabanan the less they asusa klal. So here's the difference. The difference is that a regular snake bite could have a cure. And even if it doesn't have a cure in this world, ultimately it doesn't follow you into the world to come. But the snake bite of a violation of the words of Chazal, that bite, so to speak, that ramification, that unfortunately has no cure. Incredible. So Mar goes weiter. Now remember, interestingly enough, before Ben Dama died, Ben Dama said, hey, I have a proof that I think I should be able to be treated by this Yaakov doctor. So the Gemara said, what was he going to say? So we'll say the Torah says the phrase, the pasuk itself says, Hashem wants us to live. Hashem wants us to live. We're supposed to live through the words of the Torah. So Ben Dama wanted to say to his uncle, I think this is a matter of life and death, and therefore, again, I should be allowed to take medical treatment from the min. So obviously, Ben Dama never got a chance to say it, but this is what he would have said. Rabbi Shmuel would have said like this: Hani mili b'tzina aval befarhes yalo. Rabbi Shmuel says, yes, that applies ultimately, again, in a private setting, but not in a public setting. Rashi says, here's the problem. The problem is that while it's true that perhaps that argument would have carried weight, that would be in a private setting. But in a public setting, if people would have seen a rabbinic scholar taking treatment from this min, it would have caused the Chilul Hashem, it would have caused the desecration of God's name. And therefore, again, that argument does not hold up under the microscope of Chilul Hashem. Incredible. So the Gemara says, this is actually very interesting. The Gemara says, good, the Sanya, Rabbi Shmuel used to say as follows. We'll say, now this is a pretty wild Gemara. Rabbi Shmuel said as follows, Minayin Shem Omrim Lo Adam Avod Avodas Kochavim, V'al Tarog, Sheyavod V'al Yehareg. Wow. So we'll say, how do we know that if, let's say again, someone comes over to Reuven and they say, Reuven, either worship Avodah Zara, I'm going to kill you. Those are your choices. That Reuven should worship and not be killed. How do we know that? To which the Gemara says, Tamulomar v'chai bohem v'lo sheyamos bohem Ultimately, again, because the Torah wants us to live, Hakadosh Baruch Hu says, I want you to live through my mitzvos and not die through my mitzvos. Yochol afilu b'farhes. You might have thought that this was even true, even if halacha l'maisa, he was going to worship the idolatry publicly. Therefore, the pasuk says, ultimately, do not desecrate my name. Now, again, if you had a little more coffee in you, a little more hours into the day, you'd fall off your seat in this Gemara, because this contradicts every single thing that we've ever learned about Avoda Zara. Right? Avoda Zara is one of the Gimel Chamuros, one of the three severe sins for which one must sooner give up their life rather than transgress. Right? It's Avoda Zara, Gilaras, immorality, and Shvichus Damim, and murder. And again, we never see this distinction between Avoda Zara and public, Avoda Zara and private. Yet here, Rabbi Shmuel is actually saying that if someone threatens you and says, either worship idolatry or I'll kill you, if you can worship in private and no one else sees you, worship and live. If it's in public, then you have to give your life. So I just want to point out, we're not going to get into it now, but Tosis, it's the Tosis in the wide lines, about 6 lines, in Yachal Afilu Befarhesya. Tosis, just look at the first line, it says, Umiyu, Rabbanon Pligi Alei de Rabbi Shmuel Parak Ben Sorer, Varim Befarhesya Afilu Mitzvah Kala Val Yavor, B'tzina Yesh Chilik Ben Avodas Chol Neshar Mitzvahs. So just I want to point out, Tosis already tells us there is another side to this equation, the Rabbanon. The Rabbanon disagree, and the Rabbanon say when it comes to Avodah Zara, whether it's private or public, you must sooner give up your life rather than transgress. Okay, so just want to point out, it's an interesting machlokes. We saw this back in our Sanhedrin days, but fascinating nevertheless. Okay, back to the Gemara. Amar Rabba Bar Chana Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Kol maka shemachalin Allah as HaShabbos in Mishapanim. So as I say now, back to our sugya over here, about what type of medicinal healing can one accept from an akum doctor. So, kol maka shemachalin as HaShabbos. Listen to this. Any type of injury for which you could be mechalal Shabbos, which Rabbi say essentially means what? Means what? Any life-threatening or potentially life-threatening injury, right? The Gemara says, that you cannot seek out medical intervention from an akum. Okay, which is interesting. In other words, we don't want the akum playing with life and death in the health of the Jew, treatment of a Jew. V'ika the Amri, others say, Amr Rabbi Yochanan, call, we'll say top of Chavchas 28a, call Maka shel chalal in misrapin mehen. Interesting. Others say, the way to frame it is like this, any internal injury, you cannot have an akum doctor treat it. So Mar says, what's the nafkamina? Because we'll say, it kind of sounds similar, like Bepashtos, any internal injury, we would assume has the capacity to be life-threatening. So obviously, what's the distinction between these two opinions? Interestingly enough, gav hayad v'gav haregal, an injury on the top of the hand or the top of the foot. Listen to this. The Amarav Ada Bar Masna Amarav, gav hayad v'gav haregal, harihin kemaka shel chalal u'mechalin alein as HaShabbos. So as I say, interestingly enough, there's something about an injury on the top of the hand and top of the or top of the foot that makes them as dangerous as an internal injury. Okay, and therefore you give Mechal Shabbos. Fine, so that'd be enough community between the two opinions. Amrav Zutra Bar Tovia Amrav Kol Maka Shetzricha Omed Mechal Elas Shabbos. So we'll say now transitioning to Shabbos for a second. Anytime that an injury requires an evaluation. Now, what does that mean? So Rashi explains that anytime a person has an injury, where we have to ask the question whether or not a person is going to go ahead and survive. In other words, any injury for which there is a shaila about survival, or Mechal Shabbos. Mechal Shabbos. Good. Amar Shman Bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, V'hai ishta tzimirta kimaka shel chalal dami, u'mechalin aleh as HaShabbos. Fever. Rabbi Yochanan says fever. Now ishta tzimirta means like a raging fever. So that is considered to be like an internal injury, and we're mechal Shabbos for a fever. Now, both say we're going to see. By the way, just want to point out, we're going to see now this blot. It's really interesting Gemara. It's all Talmudic medicine. So just I want to preface it by saying that remember we've seen this before. Like remember back in Maseches Gittin when we had a lot of Gemaras about medicinal healing. So the Tshuva about Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and Rav Shlomo Zalman explained that medicine in the Gemara is Chazal is mirroring what was the conventional knowledge of the time. This was not unique. I mean, sometimes they weave in certain spiritual esoteric pieces, but in general, what you see over here is just what was conventional medicine of the time, which is why, again, the Nishmas Avram brings down, he says, he quotes from Shlomo Zalman, he says, do not do this. right? Do not try these things. Do not try these things. He's like, this is not something like holy. Obviously, it's Torah because it's in Gemara. It's in Gemara. But Lamaisa, this is reflective of their times. So we don't use these medicines now. We don't use these forms of medicinal healing right now. But it's just important to understand what we see in front of us. So the Gemara says as follows. Mihechan makeh shalchalal. Now the Gemara says, by the way, what is considered to be an internal injury? Like, in other words, from what point of the body and on is considered to be an internal injury? So the Gemara says, Pirish Rabbi Ami, minasafa v'lifnim, from the lips in. Anything from the lips and in is considered to be an internal injury. Now again, why is this important? Because as we just said before, you're mechalal Shabbos for any internal injury. So now I need a definition for an internal injury. By Rabbi Lazar. So the Gemara says, Kavi v'shini mai. What about if there's an injury on the gums or your teeth? So on one hand, kevan de'aku sheninu kimake debraidamu. On one hand, since the teeth and the gums are hard, so maybe that's considered to be like an external injury. On the other hand, Dilma, kevan de gavoi kaimi kimake shel chalal dami. On the other hand, maybe since what it is on the interior of the body. In other words, it is from the lips in. Maybe it's considered to be an internal injury. So which one is it? Rabbi Abaye says, Tashma hachoshesh b'shinav lo yigma b'henas hachometz. So listen to this: if his teeth are bothering him, he should not gargle with vinegar on Shabbos. So we'll say now, why not? Because remember again, this is getting into another halacha, which is, in general, we don't engage in non-life-threatening medicinal healing on Shabbos. Why not? There's exer d'rabbanan of schikas samamonim. There's a concern that if we allow you to go out and use medicine or engage in medicinal healing, what will happen? You'll end up making remedies. Making remedies often required over grinding. Grinding, ultimately, tchina, is one of the 39 malachas, and therefore, again, Chazal said, don't engage in medicinal healing. Therefore, the Gemara says like this: if someone's teeth are bothering them, then halacha l'maisa, you should not gargle with vinegar. Shouldn't gargle with vinegar. So the Gemara says, Choshish hudalo, hakayev letuva shapir dami. But if someone's teeth were bothering him exceedingly, in other words, not just a little discomfort, but real pain, he would be permitted to gargle with vinegar. So what do you see from here? That ultimately, again, intense tooth pain is considered to be like an internal injury, and therefore one could treat it on Shabbos. To which the Gemara says, Dilma tana hecha dekayev letuva. Maybe not. Maybe at the end of the day, even if a person's teeth are really bothering him, they're still just considered to be a little bit more of a nuisance and not considered to be like a serious internal injury. So therefore, I'll say, interestingly enough, the Gemara doesn't seem to resolve this question. So in other words, I have a definition, which is good. So my definition is an internal injury is any injury on the body from the lips in, and any internal injury is considered to be a serious injury and therefore can be treated on Shabbos. Whether or not the teeth and the gums are considered to be ultimately an internal injury or not, that the Gemara seems to leave unresolved, seems to leave it as an open-ended question. Okay, so some more medicine. Tashma, Rabbi Yochanan chash b'tzafidna. Rabbi Yochanan was suffering from tzafidna. Rashi says, choli hashinayim. Again, a tooth ailment. So what did he do? Also legabe dahi matronisa. He went to a certain noble woman. Matronisa usually means like a noble woman. Rashi says over here, ovedes kochavim haisa. Now, what's important is, yes, she was a noble woman, but she was also an idolater. Right? So he went. He had a tooth ailment, and ultimately, again, he went to this idolatress. Avoda chamsho male shapsa. So she made for him a remedy, and she made for him enough to last for Thursday and for Friday. Okay. Amar le lamachar mai. He says to her, what happens if on Shabbos my teeth are still bothering me? What should I do? Now, interestingly enough, just as an aside, the fact that Rabbi Yochanan says that you could treat the tooth ailment on Shabbos would seem to indicate that halacha l'maisa, that a tooth ailment is considered to be an interior body ailment and therefore can be treated on Shabbos. By the way, dentist chevra, this is CME credits, right? You could definitely. All right, good. So the Gemara says as follows. So the Gemara says, so Amrale, lo tzrich. So she said to him, you don't need it. You'll be fine. We're treating it today and tomorrow, Thursday and Friday, you'll be fine. So this is very interesting. So this is like a good Jewish patient. No, I'm telling you, I'm not going to be healed. I'm telling you, I'm not going to be fine. Right? I'm going to be sick. So what if I need it? What if I need it on Shabbos? What should I do? So Amra, so what says, so here's what's interesting. Obviously, this was her parnasa. This is her parnasa. So, in other words, if you wanted the medicine, you had to come to her. Say we are on Chavchas Amud Aleph, first wide line, 28A, first wide line. So, Amra ishtabali delomiglis. So she said to him, I'll give you the remedy, but swear to me that you will not reveal what the remedy is. Ishtabale le'eloka Yisrael. Lo maglina. He said, I swear to the God of Israel that I will not reveal the remedy. Galyale, she gave him the remedy, so that this way again, if he needed it on Shabbos, he can make it himself. Lamachar nafak darsha bepirka. The next day, so Rabbi Yochanan went and he taught the remedy publicly. He taught the remedy publicly. He gave it over in shir. But he swore to this woman that he would not reveal it. Le'eloka di Yisrael lo maglina, aval la'ami Yisrael lo maglina. So if you look at his oath, he made an oath that he would not reveal it to the God of Israel. Okay, so he didn't reveal it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but he never made an oath that he wouldn't reveal it to the Jewish people. So therefore he went out and he revealed this. He revealed this, Ayvaha'ika chilul Hashem. But one second, isn't there a chilul Hashem? Like he swore to this woman. All right, the fact that he kind of like an interesting, like a kunz over here, that he didn't really swear, that he swore that he wouldn't reveal it to the God of Israel. Okay, he didn't swear that he wouldn't reveal it to the children of Israel. Isn't there a chilul Hashem, bless you, isn't there a chilul Hashem component? The Galilei Me'ikara. Ultimately, again, he told her from the beginning that in fact he was going to reveal it. Take a look at Rashi. The Galilei Me'ikara. Misha shegil salo amrala di'i shalom nishbati velo amarti belo kedi Yisrael elo le'elo kedi Yisrael. So it's interesting. He says, I did not swear by the God of Israel. Rather, again, I swore to the God of Israel. Okay, so I'll say, so this, by the way, just as an aside, is a fascinating story over here. Like, what exactly is this? What exactly is this? This doesn't seem to be like a very scrupulous story. The underpinning of it must be as follows. That Rabbi Yochanan understood that this form of medicinal healing was necessary for the masses. And it was not right that it should be held by certain individuals, and only if you had the money to access it should you get it. So Rabbi Yochanan felt that the need for public health outweighed his responsibility towards this particular woman. So I'll say, it's interesting, right? It's in other words, so he felt that the need for the public to be able to, the need for the public to be able to access this remedy was a matter of public health. And that matter of public health trumped any other consideration. He went ahead and he took care of the Chil Hashem component by telling her from the beginning what he was going to do before he did it. Quite fascinating, quite fascinating. So the Gemara says as follows. Just an interesting thing in general about sometimes there definitely is this clash between we'll call it the capitalistic side of medicine and the actual altruistic side of medicine, right? There is this clash, right? Which makes sense. Obviously, the doctor, the dentist over here, she's making her parnasa like this. But Rabbi Yochanan is saying, but people need this, and they're not going to have access to it if they don't have the money. So how do you balance that? See, he felt that the right thing to do in this situation was to disclose to the general public. Fascinating. Okay, we'll say, but again, that's not the capitalism versus altruism components of medicine is not our topic for our shir today. Although an interesting idea. So the Gemara says as follows. We'll say, by the way, this, especially, I always say this, like, especially like in the Jewish community, this is like a very big thing, right? Because if you are in the medical field, whatever medical field you're in, and you live on a Jewish block, your skill set is going to be exploited consistently, right? Consistently. Chevra, it is very important to understand that if you have a neighborhood doctor, dentist, nurse, and you are utilizing their services, okay, maybe you don't have to compensate them at full price, but understand that you're using someone's skill set for which they generate their parnasa. Be careful not to take advantage of that. No different that if your neighbor was an accountant, right? It's funny, no one would ever say, hey, Chaim, you're an accountant. We're such good friends. Can you do me a favor? I know we're having dinner together. Can you just spend 5 minutes with me on my taxes? I mean, maybe people do that. I don't know, maybe they do that. But I think it's very important, however, that whenever you're asking a favor that involves someone's professional skill set, be sensitive to what it is that you're asking. And it's not just anyone, lawyers, doctors, anyone and everyone. Be sensitive to that. In any event, the Gemara says as follows. What's the point over here? Alma, Kimaka shel chalal damya. They will say, again, coming full circle, what's the point of all this? The point of all this ultimately is that halacha l'maisa, that a dental issue is considered to be an internal injury. That's the bottom line with all of this. In other words, there's two things happening over here. The fact that Rabbi Yochanan needed medicinal healing or felt that he would have been able to take medicinal healing on Shabbos, and the fact that he felt compelled to teach this in public indicates to us that obviously a dental issue is considered to be an internal injury. Very interesting. To which the Gemara says, Amar Reb Nachman bar Yitzchak, Shani tzafidna, ho'ilu maschel b'peh, Tzafidna is different. Because we'll say, so apparently, again, and I don't know, it would be interesting to see, I'm sure so the dentist could do a little bit of additional research on this. I don't know what this is, perhaps if there is a modern day equivalent of Tzafidna, but Lamaisa, what was unique about Tzafidna was it started in the mouth, but ultimately, again, somehow spread intestinally. So somehow some type of infection that could go ahead and really wreak havoc on the body. And obviously everyone agrees that what? That lamaisa, once something spreads to the intestines or even just more internally in the body, obviously that is going to be a makkah shel chalal and has to be treated on Shabbos. Okay, so Rabbi say, so now some more about tzafidna. My simane, how do you know if you have tzafidna? The Gemara says, Rami midi beikachi umaisi damen beidari. So it's gum sensitivity. If you touch your gums, anything that you touch to your gums, the gums begin to bleed between the rows of teeth. So highly sensitive gums is usually an indication of tzafidna. And again, I both say, tzafidna, everyone, you see, again, I just want to point out, we're still with our machlokes about whether or not a dental emergency is considered to be an internal injury. So that machlokes still exists, but it seems to be with all of that, everyone still agrees that tzafidna is considered to be an internal injury. Why? Because it spreads. How do you know if you have tzafidna, or I guess the beginning stages of tzafidna? Heightened gum sensitivity. Okay, mimai habi, how do you get tzafidna? To which the Gemara says, mikariri kariri dechiti, or michamimi chamimi disari. By eating very cold wheat-based foods or very warm barley-based foods, or mishiyuri kase deharnasa, or else is interesting, or eating leftover fish hash. So just as an aside, eating leftover fish hash always seems to be like a bad idea, right? Again, even if it's not for tzafidna, there can't be anything good that comes out of that, right? But Lamaisa, so interesting, if I will say, what's also fascinating is to understand through the eyes of Chazal, through the eyes of Talmudic era medicine, how much ailment was caused by diet, or at least their perception that ailment was caused by diet. It's quite fascinating. So my avdoleh, how do you treat tzafidna? What do you do for it? So you take yeast water, v'shemen zayis, and oil, and olive oil, umelach, and you go ahead and salt. You mix that together. Omar Baravashi Amar, and again, apparently you take that concoction and you apply it on the affected areas. You apply it on the gums. You take goose fat and apply it to the gums with a goose feather. Good. So Abaye said, I did all this and it did not work. So Abaye obviously had a very bad case of tzafidna. He's like, I did everything, it did not work. Until a particular Arab merchant told me, I see kashyasa de zesa de lo mali tilsa. Take olive pits from olives that have not yet reached 1/3 of their maturity. Vikalinu, burn it. Amara charata, burn it on a brand new shovel. Vidavik be dari. Vidavik be didari. Didari avdi. Vidavik be didari avdi hachivistai. Take the paste, essentially take the burnt olive pit paste, and apply it on the affected areas. Bless you, Abai said, I did this, and it worked. Rabbi Yochanan hechi avid hachi. So I'll say, so now the Gemara says, 1 second. Rabbi Yochanan, how are you getting, the Gemara is coming full circle now. Rabbi Yochanan, how are you getting treated by this akum for your tzafidna? After, like in say, everyone is agreeing, whatever you hold about dental emergencies, or dental emergencies considered to be internal emergencies or not, everyone is agreeing that tzafidna is potentially fatal. So how are you going ahead and getting treatment from an akum for your tzafidna? To which the Gemara says, so it says, we just said before, that any makkah, right, any type of injury for which you are allowed to machal Shabbos, meaning it's life and death, you can't get treated by an akum. So what's going on over here? How are you allowed to get treatment over here? Adam Chashav Shiny. Rabbi Yochanan was different. Why? We'll say, what is always the concern with getting treatment from an akum? What's always the concern? He's going to kill the Jew. So obviously, when treating a very important person, there's going to be a heightened level of vigilance on the part of the akum. Obviously, again, he's not going to take those same liberties. So we'll say, but 1 second. But there's a Rabbi Avo is also an Adam Chashav. And listen to this. Yaakov Mina, yet he was treated by this guy, Yaakov the Min. Right? Yaakov Mina. We'll say that's how he had, so that's Yaakov Ish Kfar Sechanya. That's who we had before, right? In the case of Daru. So Yaakov the Min treated him, and he put on him sama ashake. He put on him some type of ointment on his leg. V'ilo Rabbi Ami Rabbi Asi d'lahu l'shake paske l'sake. And had not Rabbi Ami Rabbi Asi been there, interestingly it says they licked off the ointment. Now why it says they licked off the ointment or they just removed it? Had they not removed it from the leg of Rabbi Avo would have lost his leg. So what do you see from here? That even if someone is important, they're not necessarily immune to the danger of being treated by an akum. To which the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan Rofe Mumcha Hava. So the Gemara says, no, Rabbi Yochanan's doctor, this lady, she was a Rofe Mumcha. She was an expert. And again, I will say, remember again, with an expert, there's another issue. An expert has to be very careful about what? Preserving their reputation. Right, because that's how they make their parnasa. So no matter how much, it's interesting, sometimes no matter how much the akum hates the Jew, there's one thing he loves more than hating the Jew, which is money, right? And therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, if it's a rofe mumcha, the person is not going to sabotage their entire career with hatred for the Jew. To which the Gemara says, Rabbi Avo nami rofe mumcha. But 1 second, Yaakov the Min was also an expert doctor. The Gemara says, Shan Rabbi Avo de mukmi be mine benefashayu. The Gemara says, here is different, right? The case of Rabbi Avo is, we'll say, now Rabbi Avo was a high value target for the minin. Why? Because one of the things Rabbi Avo constantly did is he engaged in this theological sparring with a lot of these apikarsim and minim, and disproved a lot of their arguments. So they hated him. As such, this guy Yaakov, who was treating Rabbi Avo, despite the fact that he was a rofe mumcha, he was willing to go down with the ship. In other words, if it meant killing Rabbi Avo, he was willing to sabotage his entire career for that as well. The Gemara uses the lashon of Tamos Nafshi in Plishtim. Let me die with the Philistines. I will say now, what is this? This is the story of Shimshon. Right? Remember again when Shimshon his eyes were gouged out. He's prisoner by the Plishtim. They bring him into the Colosseum. And he says, Kodesh Baruch Hu, Chaskini Nab Hamazos, just give me this last burst of strength to push down the pillars. He brought down the Colosseum, killing all of the Plishtim, but of course, lost his own life in the process as well. So that becomes an expression. Tamos Nafshi in Plishtim means someone's willing to do harm to someone else, even at his own expense. So therefore, again, this Yaakov Akum, he hated Rabbi Avo so much that literally, again, he was willing to kill Rabbi Avo even at the expense of his own career. Amr Shmuel. Shmuel says as follows, Hai Padasa Sakanti Mechalin Asa Shabbos. So this Padasa, what is Padasa? Rashi says, Petza Makas Cherev. It's a flesh wound with a sword. If you receive a flesh wound with a sword, this is considered to be Sakanas Nefashos. It's a mortal danger, and therefore halacha l'maisa, you could treat it even on Shabbos. Maya susa. So ultimately, again, what's the cure? What's the remedy? So there's two parts. First of all, lemifsak dama, to stop the bleeding. Tachli b'chala, take cress and mix it in vinegar, and apparently again apply that to the affected area. Las suke. Then to heal the wound, what do? Garda divla vigirda da'asna. So take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says over here, Garda divla. This is a type of grass. Vigirda da'asna. So ultimately, I'm going to say. So these are Rashi says over here. Esev sheshmo yavla kel desota. Girda shagor sharshev nosin osa girda im girdas eitzasneva osa tachboshes. So apparently, again, you go and you take this type of grass together with some thorns. You grind it up and you make it into some type of bandage. O nikra mikilkalasa. Or Rashi says over here, you take nikra mikilkalasa means the worms that come out when like a chicken pecks at the garbage. So take that, grind that up, make that into some type of salve, and put that on the wound as well. Amar of Safra, okay, good to know. Amar of Safra, it will say, okay, let's go a little bit weiter. Amar of Safra, Hai in vasa parvanka de malacha de mafsahi. This is very interesting. This in vasa, now what's in vasa? Rashi says, Abu ba hadomala inva, a boil, or a pretty significant blister that looks like a grape, right? So again, I said a pretty significant boil or blister. So if you have that, the Gemara says, that is the messenger of the angel of death, right? I don't know how you code that in the medical charts, like, what is that? So the nice, again, and by the way, also I'll say, it's fascinating, obviously, that's not what you say to the patients, right? But Lamaisa, again, the Gemara is warning us, obviously, if you have that type of boil, pretty serious. Maya Susa, what do you do with it? So the Gemara says, how do you treat it? Tigna beduvsha o karpasa betaila. So what do you do? Rashi says over here, Tigna, I'm sorry. Good. Tigna beduvsha esif hanikaro de balaz v'shochim also andvash. So you take once again this type of grass called tigna. You grind it up and you mix it together with honey. Or karpasa again, karpas, in this context, celery, betaila. Grind up celery, mix it with strong wine, and again, apply that to the area as well. Adahachi v'hachi nabos, and obviously, having this type of blister is a pretty acute situation, so it's going to take a little bit of time to prepare the remedy. What should you do in the meantime? So the Gemara says, adahachi v'hachi, leise in vasa basmina, finigdarer iluye. Rather, what should you do in the meantime? Take a grape. Now, take a grape that resembles the blister, meaning what? Chiyurti lichiyurti v'uchmasi l'uchmasi. If it's like a lighter blister, like a whiter blister, take a white grape, a green grape, right? Otherwise, if it's a darker blister, take a red grape. And what should you do? And ultimately, and roll it, right? Roll it over the affected area. So apparently, really what you're doing is you're softening up the blister until the remedy itself is prepared. Incredible. Amar Rava says as follows, Hai simta parvanka da ashasahi. So we'll say simta is an open wound or an abscess. An open wound or an abscess. This is considered to be, again, parvanka means the messenger. And we'll say, just say something amazing. If you remember again, parvanka, if that word sounds familiar, it's because it was in Rashi at the end of last week's parsha, right? Ultimately, again, when Pinchas comes to Moshe Rabbeinu and he says, Zimri and Kazvi are engaging in this immoral behavior. So he says, what do we do? Moshe Rabbeinu was paralyzed. So again, Pinchas says to Moshe, Pinchas says that you taught us that a bal aramis kanoim pogin bo. So Moshe said to him, Karasa, Moshe Rabbeinu used the lashon. I forgot the exact lashon of Rashi, but he says, Parvanka, Pinchas, you are the messenger, right? You are the messenger, ultimately, again, to carry out the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the word is familiar. Good. So if a person has an abscess or an open wound, Parvanka da ashasahi. This is considered to be the messenger of fever. In other words, that's an indication, ultimately, again, that a person is going to have a strong fever. So what should you do? So the Gemara says, Lemichye shisin iskatule. So ultimately, again, so first of all, to begin to heal it, what should you do? This is interesting. Flick it 60 times. Right? Flick it 60 times. So the Gemara says, and again, I guess what that does is that softens it as well to be able to open it up. So the Gemara says, then open it up in a crisscross fashion. But that's only if it did not become white on the top. But if it already became white on the top, you don't worry about it, because that's indicative that it's going to open up on its own slowly or shortly. Rabbi Yaakov Chosh Amavezavosai Bipika. So what says interesting over here? So Ashi suffered from pika. What's pika? Rashi says over here, Perish Tabas shall base rei. So interestingly enough, so there seems to be some type of affliction by the anus. So again, he had some type of issue over here, irritation, something over here. So what do you do for this? So the Gemara says, Orile Rabbi Ami va'amrile Rabbi Asi Orile, Lesi Shev Bene Ala Tolna. So take, again, Rashi says over Shev Bene, we'll say Chav Ches Babes, 28b, second line from the top. Rashi, also second line from the top, Shev Bene Ala Tolna, Lashon Sheva Garinin Adumin Ketolas, and he said, so 7 seeds of red aloe. Okay, 7 seeds of red aloe. V'tzir le bechalala debeit savara. Wrap it in cloth, right? Specifically, again, the cloth that was used by the opening of a shirt. The lichroch iluye nira barka, and go ahead and so you're taking the red aloe seeds, you're wrapping it up in a piece of cloth, dafka the cloth taken from the opening of the shirt. Wrap it up with an animal hair. V'tamishle benat v'chira, dip it in white naft. V'likle, burn it. Burn it. Now, what you're doing is you're creating an ointment, essentially. Create an ointment. Ubadar le'iluye, and then put it on the affected area. Okay? It could very well be also, after going through these steps, you're like, you know what? Doesn't hurt that badly. I think I'm okay. I think I'm all right. I'm good. So verse is as follows. Sa'adahachi v'hachi, le'se kashisa da'asana, le'nach pika lahade pika. Now, obviously, all of these remedies take time. So what do you do in the interim? So go ahead and bring kashisa da'asana. Rashi says over here, garin shal priyasne, botnim hagdelim bisne umeilin garinin. So take a pit of fruit, and ultimately, again, put the opening of the pit opposite the opening of the body. And all so this is all good for some type of what we'll call it, so injury or anal injury that's on the or discomfort that's on the outside. What does one do if there's something internal? So leisi tarba de tzafirta telo eftach v'lifshar v'lishtei bei. So what should you do? Take Rashi says over here. Tarba de tzafirta telo eftach chaylev siira shelo yalda. So take the fat of a goat that has never given birth. Okay, melt it and apply it to the affected area. Apply it internally. Okay, v'ilo, if you don't have any melted goat fat from a goat that has not given birth yet, what's the next best thing? Laisi tzalas tarfakra demiavshe betula. Take leaves, literally leaves from a gourd that have dried out in the sun. V'likle, then again burn it. V'libder eluye, and then put it on the affected area. Again, so we'll say it's fascinating. It's all herbal medicine, right? It's all natural medicine. It's just fascinating to see. And again, once again, did it work? Didn't it work? I don't know. But again, I just want to point out, this is not uniquely Jewish. This is Chazal mirroring what was the medical remedies of their time. First wide line. V'ilo, what happens if you don't have the gourd leaves? So what should you do? Laisi mishakti chilazuni. Take the shells of snails. And again, I will say, bepashtos, again, the Gemara doesn't say, bepashtos, what it says is, crush it, burn it, make it into an ointment, and apply it. Vila, if you don't have that, mashach kira. Belinko peshachaki de kisna bekaita. And if you don't have that, so what should you do? Go ahead and take wax. Go ahead and velishko b'shachi the kisna. Go ahead and put it literally again in woolen garments in the summer. Uda amar gafna b'sifsa, or in cotton during the winter. So okay, Rabbi Huda. So we'll say so again. Fine. These are all different remedies. Rabbi Avo chash bo'odne. Rabbi Avo had an issue with his ears. He had a significant earache. The Gemara says. I just want to show you. Fine, he had a different orele Rabbi Yochanan, Amrele Bei Midrasha, my orele. So we'll say, so what was the remedy? So again, Rabbi Abba is asking for a remedy. So either some say Rabbi Yochanan told him, others say in the base marriage, they told him this, my orele. What was the remedy? So the Gemara is my orele, Kiha da Amra Abaye, Amrele Aim. So Abaye says, my mother told me the following. Lo Ibri Kol Yasa Ela Lo Udna. The kidney was only created for the ear. Now, what does that mean? Apparently, we'll see the kidney juices, right, have certain medicinal properties for the ear. V'amarava, Amrli minyumi asya, kulu shakainu kasha leudna lebar mimayda kol yasa. And Rava said, minyumi, the doctor told me, in general, all liquids are harmful for the ear except for kidney juice, kidney liquid. So apparently, again, that is beneficial for the ear. So how do you get kidney juice? What do you do? Laisi kol yosad de barcha karcha. So literally go ahead, take the kidney of a bald goat. Now, what's a bald goat? Right? Kishmo keinhu, right? In other words, as opposed to a sheep, which has a lot of wool. So again, a goat doesn't have as much wool. So take the kidney of a bald goat, v'lekari shesi v'arev, cut it in a crisscross fashion, v'lenech amlola dinura, put it on coals, and what's going to happen? The juices are going to seep out. And again, I will say once again, when the liquid that comes out, put that in your ear. Put it in your ear. But however, lo kariri lo chamimi ela pshuri. Not too hot, not too cold, but again, just kind of lukewarm. Lukewarm kidney juice for an earache. V'ilo. Now, what happens if you can't get kidney juice? So the Gemara says, "Laisi tarba dechi pushta gamlanisa v'lifsha v'lashadarbe." So we'll say, so what does this mean? Take a look at Rashi. One second. I'm going to find it over here. Good. Tarba de safirta de la aftach. Good. Am I reading the right thing over here? Yeah. Tarba dechi pushta. No. Sorry, if you don't have the kidney juice, laisi tarba dechi pushta gamlanisa v'lifsha v'lishtebe. Let me just find the Rashi over here. Barcha karcha. Oh, gamlanisa. Sorry. Here it is. So Rashi says over here. It's actually almost right across in Rashi. Gamlanisa. Rashi says over here. Gasa. So go ahead and take this other right. Pushta gamlanisa. Melt it down, and put that in the ear. V'ilo, and if you can't find that, lemalye leudne mishcha. Okay, so if you can't get any of that, so let's say again these other liquids are not available to you. So what should you do? Fill your ear with oil, right? With mishcha is just oil. Make 7 wicks out of aspasta. Right, aspasta is like a type of straw. So go ahead and what? V'leisi shufsa detuma, and go ahead and take a clove of garlic. V'leisiv barka bechad reisha, and then tie it ultimately again with an animal hair on one end. V'litli beinura, light a fire. V'idach reisha musa ba'udna, the other side of it, put in your ear. V'leisev udne lahadanura, put your ear close to the fire. V'yizdar mizeka, and be careful. Ultimately, again, that wind shouldn't get into your ear. V'nishkal chada, v'nagiv chada, and ultimately, again, as 1 week is used up, replace it with another one. Okay, lishnachrina, another approach for this as well. So the Gemara says lishnachrina, v'ilo. If you don't have any of the aforementioned liquids, leise shev psilta. Bikra, go ahead and take 7 of these wicks, right? Bikra, v'shayifle mishcha de'aspasta, and go ahead and smear it with balsam oil. V'naisi chad reisha benura, put one end in a fire. V'chad reisha be'odne, and the other end in his ear. V'nishkol chada v'nanach chada v'yizdar mizeka, and literally again as the wicks are burned, replace them, but be careful ultimately again from a draft. V'ilo, and if you don't have this, laisi udna dinada, take purple wool, to lo mashkif, that has not been combed, v'nanachbe, put it in the ear, v'litle le'uye bahade nura, and put your ear close to the fire. We'll say the idea, by the way, of the ear close to the fire is why? It sounds like that the heat should cause some of the liquid inside to evaporate. Umizdar bezeka, but ultimately again be careful about any type of draft. V'ilo, and ultimately again if you don't have this, leise gufsa dekanya asika bar meyashnin. Go ahead, Rashi says over here, Gufsa de Kanya bar me'eshnin shvofer shalkana yashin. So go ahead and we'll say, we'll stop over here because we're right out of time, right in the middle of the ear ailment. So we'll say, we'll pick up at Miras Hashem. We'll say, so I'll just ask you, just remember, we'll say, you have to ask yourself a question like what are we doing over here, right? Like what is this? Especially if we go with the idea that Lamaisa, again, these type of remedies are not really used anymore. So what is it that we're doing? So we'll say this is an incredible exercise in Talmud Torah. And sometimes what it means to learn and what it means to be a Yid is just do what you're told to do even if it doesn't make sense to you. Say to yourself, well, 1 second, wouldn't I be better served learning a different blot of Gemara with halacha or hashkaf or something else? HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to us to learn Avoda Zara, Daf Kaf Kasama Beis. It has relevant information for you. It doesn't have relevant information to you. That's not the point. The point is that sometimes what HaKadosh Baruch Hu asks us to do is to be good soldiers. And good soldiers follow orders. The orders make sense, don't make sense. I like them, I don't like them. They inspire me, they don't inspire me. Sometimes the job of a Yid is to be inspired, and sometimes the job of the Yid is to follow orders. I will say today, we are zocha to follow orders. And the truth is, when you follow orders and you recognize as following orders that I'm part of something so much bigger than myself, that in and of itself is the greatest source of inspiration. Let's stop here for today. More remedies tomorrow, Mir Hashem. Shkoyach. All right, Chevron Zoom. Have a great day, everyone.